Phantom Phone Lines Season 0, the show featuring carefully crafted, dramatized, voicemail message-style stories of unsettling, surreal, and perhaps paranormal encounters. Without further ado, let's hear what's been left on the line.
Hey, I wasn't sure if this even counted as anything paranormal. It still might not. I keep telling myself it wasn't. But something happened last week that I can't stop thinking about, and when I go over it in my head, it feels like something followed me home. Like I brought back cold. I need to talk to somebody who won't just laugh it off. I'm a university student, psychology major. Not like that helps, because you'd think someone studying the human mind would be able to explain this. But no, not even close. So I go to college in a big city, loads of buses, loads of noise, loads of tired people just trying to get through the week. Where I'm from, though, not the city, I'm talking about my hometown, people don't like the last seat on the late-night buses. There's this story older people whisper about, like it's nothing, like it's just folklore you laugh off. They say that's where the spirits sit when they're too tired to walk. Sounds poetic, right? Like something you'd hear from your grandmother while she shuffles a deck of old playing cards. I grew up hearing that stuff, but I never believed any of it. Not really. You hear it enough as a kid that it just becomes background noise. Something spooky your aunt says to seem mysterious. I never thought about it again after moving out. Not until last week. It was one of those days where everything just stacks up wrong. Group project mess, 2 deadlines, and that miserable, drizzly rain that doesn't look like much but somehow soaks straight through your clothes. All I wanted, literally the only thing I cared about, was getting home and falling face first into my bed. I wasn't even going to eat dinner. Just sleep. I remember walking toward the bus stop with this kind of half-zombie shuffle, hugging my bag to my chest, trying not to drop anything. When the bus finally came, I didn't really think, I just reacted. The doors opened at the back, and I just climbed in automatically, barely even looking. I slouched down fast, straight to the back seats, without thinking about anything except sitting. Everything back there is darker, quieter. No one else was around except a middle-aged woman way up front, and some guy near the middle scrolling through his phone, screen lighting up his face like a weird little moon. No one near me. It was perfect. Dark, warm, quiet. The kind of warm that makes your eyes sink shut. Dangerous warm. Nap warm. Which is why I got my phone out. I figured if I put on a podcast, at least something vaguely interesting, it'd help me stay awake and alert enough not to miss my stop. Something to keep me focused. The host introduced the show, and I remember thinking, yeah, this'll do it. I'll make it home. But before the episode even got past the first sponsor ad, my battery percentage flashed on screen. 80%, 49%, 12, 1%. All within, maybe 3 seconds? It didn't even give me time to panic, it just died. Phone screen flat black. I didn't even get to plug in a charger. It was like something sucked the power right out of it, like someone held a vacuum over the battery, just draining it. I just stared at it in my lap for a moment, confused, mouth open like an idiot, thinking, did I press the wrong thing? Is my charger breaking? Did I get hacked? Nothing made sense. I turned it over in my hands, over and over, like I was going to find a hole burned through it. Then the cold hit. Not a breeze. Not AC. It wasn't blowing. It wasn't moving. It sat there. It came from my right side, the window side, but it felt like it was pressing against my arm. Not ear cold, not winter cold. Think freezer cold. Think glass of ice left too long on a table cold. A dense cold. I put my hand against the window to see if it was a weird draft, and the glass was warm. Warm. Everywhere except one spot, right next to the seat. A single patch of freezing air, like someone else was taking up space there. I remember pulling my elbow in, pressing myself closer to the aisle, laughing nervously under my breath like it was stupid, like it didn't matter. But you know when you're trying to pretend something isn't happening and your body reacts anyway? My shoulders were tightening, like my muscles were trying to crawl into each other. I didn't want to look at the window again. I didn't. But eventually I did, like something kept poking at me to look. That's when I noticed it was fogging. Only one side of it. The side closest to that cold. The rest of the bus windows were clear, but right there, beside me, the glass fogged up slow, like a slow exhale against it. Then, I couldn't believe it, but the fog formed a shape, a rounded shape against the glass, like a shoulder, a curve of a head resting there. Not detailed, not cartoonish, just the unmistakable weight of someone leaning. I thought I could maybe wipe it away, so I breathed toward that foggy patch, thinking maybe my breath would mix with it and smear it away. It didn't. My breath cleared only what I touched. But the fog silhouette stayed frozen in place, like something separate, something that wasn't me. That's when my body stopped pretending everything was fine. My legs started bouncing like they were trying to run without me. My throat was dry. I kept swallowing even though there was nothing to swallow. I wanted to stand up and move seats, but the bus was practically empty now, and I didn't want to look dramatic. I didn't want to be that person who panics over nothing. So instead I waited. Sat there stiff as cardboard until my stop came. And when I finally stood up to leave, the ticket machine beeped. Twice. 1 beep per passenger leaving. Always has. Everyone knows that. But it was just me getting off. I looked at the driver like maybe the machine was broken, and the guy looked up into the rearview mirror. Eyes lifted over my shoulder like he was making sure no one else was behind me. He frowned. Not confused, not annoyed, like he expected it. Then he muttered, quietly but absolutely clear, "Next time, don't sit back there if you're alone." He didn't wait for a response. Just closed the doors. I walked home fast, trying not to look at reflections in the windows I passed. I kept feeling like something cold was pacing behind me. Like it was still too tired to walk alone. I know that sounds ridiculous. I know. But I practically ran home and hopped in my bed and pulled the covers up on my head. I didn't fall asleep right away. Not even close. I kept lying there, eyes open, feeling that cold on my right side. Not unbearable, just wrong. Like someone left a freezer door cracked open inside my mattress. I wasn't freaking out. Not exactly. More like my brain was doing this desperate thing where it tries to explain everything before it gets too weird to handle. You ever do that? Just start talking yourself down, even in your own head, like you're trying to stop yourself from thinking. I kept telling myself it could have been anything. There were a dozen normal explanations. I just had to pick one. Maybe the bus's insulation was failing at that one spot, and cold air was leaking in through the window? That happens, right? Maybe that cold patch was always there, and I just never sat back there long enough to notice. Maybe the fog wasn't a shape at all. Maybe it was just how condensation formed on weird glass. I mean, people see faces in toast all the time. Doesn't make the toast haunted. And the ticket machine, it's just a machine. Those things glitch constantly. Sometimes they beep twice when someone with a bag goes through, or when the driver presses something accidentally. Right? It all sounded reasonable if I thought about it long enough. Reasonable enough. I could feel myself starting to calm down, like I'd almost convinced myself. Then I remembered my phone. That stupid battery drop. That instant death from 80% to 1%. No glitch I've ever heard of does that. Not instantly. Not like someone siphoned power out of it like a straw. I tried to come up with something. Maybe there was water in the battery, or maybe the cold messed with it, or maybe the charger's broken, anything. But it just didn't sit right. None of it did. I pulled the blankets tighter around my left side, not the cold side, and slowly shifted all the way over to the wall. Like I needed something solid between me and whatever I didn't want to think about anymore. I eventually fell asleep. The sun was already peering in my window when I woke up the next morning. I looked over on my dresser and my phone and charged back to 100%. Everything seemed better in the morning, but it didn't take long for my brain to circling back to that silly thing I grew up hearing. About spirits too tired to walk. About the last seat at night. I didn't believe it then. But after last night, after lying there in my dark room with that cold patch beside me, I kept thinking, if something is too tired to walk, how far would it follow you?
Hey, this is going to be quick, I promise. I'm not one to call in like this. I listen, mostly, when I'm up late baking or folding laundry. But y'all's show feels like the kind of place you can put a story down and not have folks roll their eyes. So here I am. I live out where there's plenty of country houses and the wind has a mind of its own. Old neighborhood, porches, magnolias, the kind of place where everybody knows if your porch light's been out and why. I'm a woman of a certain age, been doing the same route to work for years, so I know the rhythms of this place. The rooster that starts too early, the train way off yonder, the church bell on Sundays. And I know what my house sounds like. For as long as I can remember, the shutters on the front window of my house have rattled when the wind comes off the field. That's normal. They're wooden, original to the house, swelling and shrinking with every season. When the north wind blows in winter, they chatter like old teeth. This house has 2 good stories and 100 small noises. I learned to sleep with them. About 3 months ago, something new started. I'd be sitting up late, reading or watching some late-night program, when the wind would pick up out of nowhere. The shutters would rattle, sure, but then, clear as a knuckle on a table, there would be this slow, measured knock, knock, knock. 3 soft knocks. Same cadence every time. Slow, patient, like someone tapping the back of their hand and waiting for an answer. It always came from the same window, the one that looks out over the side yard where my mama used to plant zinnias. Not the kitchen, not the parlor, that one window. And it was always after midnight. Always when the moon was out, too. Full or half didn't seem to matter. But if the sky was dark and cloudy, I didn't hear it. Seems small to say, but it's a pattern. Midnight, moon, 3 knocks. The first time I heard it, I sat very still and tried to convince myself it was some branch hitting the wood or the neighbor setting up some late joke. I turned up the TV louder. I put the kettle on. I told myself things. Then it knocked again, slow and clear, right behind the shutters. I got up and went to the window. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Habit, a hope somebody needed help, and I could be the kind soul. I flipped the latch real quick and jerked the shutter open, just a crack to catch whatever was hitting it, to maybe flick a flashlight out there and see a raccoon or a branch swaying. The moment my fingers touched the latch, every sound stopped. Not just the knocks, even the wind seemed to hush like a room that's been told to be quiet. I stood there with my hand on that wood and the hairs on my arms prickling, and nothing moved. No sound, no animal, no one walking off, just my own breathing and the hum of the refrigerator in the back. Now, when that happens, a lot of folks in my part of town would tell you the old thing. Knocking at the house is not always about mischief. Some say 3 knocks can be a warning, a message from what's gone on before. Old women at church put it this way without dropping the words. A knock means somebody's looking, and sometimes that looking ain't friendly. My grandmother used to say, don't be too quick to answer a knock at night. Not all visitors need a chair. That's how it's said, as if the visitor could be polite and still carry trouble. But I'm a woman who works, who pays bills, who has to be reasonable. There's always a reason. A loose shutter swinging on a hinge, a kid poking around on some dare, thermal contraction making wood click. I called the neighbor who lives 2 doors down. He's more stubborn than I am, and I'd rather climb a tree than call a repairman. And he laughed and said, "Wind does weird things, ma'am. The old houses sing." I tried to sleep on that. A few nights later, the knocks came again. Slow, 3-time, right at midnight. I sat on the edge of the bed with the lamp low and listened, not wanting to move. After the 3rd knock, I talked back, like some fools in our town do. I said out loud, "I hear you. Who's there?" My voice felt small in the room. Silence, then a long pause, then the soft scuff of something moving away from the window like feet on pine straw. By morning, I had all the senses let loose. Part of me wanted to put down salt across the sill, part wanted to buy new hinges, part wanted to call my sister and laugh it off. I did both. I bought new screws. I sat with my sister on the phone and talked until we both laughed. But the laugh didn't keep me from looking out that window the next night. Here's another thing about this house. It holds memory. Old places do. The wallpaper curls where hands have rested. The porch paint remembers my brother's name, scratched in many summers ago. The side yard still smells faintly of my mama's lilies, even though they've been gone a while. The window where it knocks looks out on where my child used to learn to ride a bike, where we put out lanterns for the 4th one year. You get used to the way a place carries who you were. I started keeping a notebook by the bed. Didn't think of it as anything special. Just wanted to keep track. Nights I heard it, moon phase, whether the trash truck had gone by that evening. I wrote the dates down like I'd write appointment times. There was a pattern. 3 times a week, almost always within a day of rain returning. That made me think of pressure changes and thermal movement. But one night the knocks came while the storm was over, and the air felt like it had been scrubbed clean. That's when the story in my head got darker. People in my family do 2 things with things they don't like. They name them and they watch them. So I named it the knock out of spite, like giving it a proper noun would shrink its power. And I watched. I watched the moon, watched the rain patterns, watched the neighbor's porch light blink. I asked the preacher at church, polite, soft-spoken man, and he told me, real gently, that some knocks are reminders. He said not everything that came in the dark was wicked, but some things were warnings. He told me to bless the house and to trust my own sense. He didn't say the word spirit. He didn't have to. There was one night I won't forget. I'd been working the late shift, my bones heavy with the week, and when I came in, my cat, old rascal, was nowhere to be found. He usually comes in for supper. I went down the hall calling him, and then the knocks came. Right after that, a soft scraping at the door. I walked to the front room and saw the silhouettes, not of a woman or a man, but of shadow in the window where the knock comes from. My cat had curled at the sill as if he'd seen something beyond it. He leapt up and hissed and darted under the couch, the kind of fear only an animal carries without shame. From then on, I treated the nights like I would any thin ice. I locked the deadbolt, left the inside lamps on, and kept a broom by the door, more as comfort than weapon. I put a wind chime out on the porch, the kind that tinkles when a breeze comes, because sometimes you want to hear sound that's not someone knocking at your roundabout. Neighbors started mentioning it too. Little things. The old lady from the corner store said her cousin's shutters in the next town over had been hit in the same way. The mechanic down on Main said he fixed a shutter that was tapped by a branch on a gust, and the person who owned the house swore it wasn't that. The stories clustered like gnats. Not everyone told the same version. Some swore the knocks meant a death in the family was coming. Others said it was just the house settling. Neither sat comfortable with me. One Sunday after service, my niece, young and full of that unafraid kind of curiosity, asked me what I'd do if it knocked, and I answered. I told her I'd answer the door if it was day, but at night I'd listen first. Sometimes, I said, you answer and there's a lost soul who needs a coat. Other times you answer and you invite trouble into your kitchen. I'm old enough to choose. She rolled her eyes and left to meet her friends, but later she came back with one of them and said, "We'll sit up with you, Auntie." That was a comfort. The two of them stayed later than I would have let them, under blankets on the couch, talking low so as not to call whatever knocks louder. We fell asleep to the sound of them whispering and the fan spinning above. Night came and the knocks came, right on schedule. They always come 3 times. This time, the girls laughed, and one of them sang a little song at the window. When that knock came, the song stopped. One of them touched the latch, and the knock stopped again, exactly like before. The 3 of us sat there in a hush. For a long while, nothing happened. Then, when we were about to say we were tired and to stop being ridiculous, there was a soft, mournful sound. Not a knock this time, but a breath, sighing like the house itself had an ache. We didn't sleep much that night. I made coffee and we sat and watched the window until morning. In the pale light, the world seemed kinder. No knocks. The girls left with sleepy eyes and the kind of promise that makes your chest warm. They'd come back and help plant zinnias in the spring by that side yard, where those shutters looked out. Sometimes I think about moving. I am not young anymore. I can see the town changing. Kids with earbuds staring at their phones, businesses closing, new paint over old scars. But there's a part of me that remembers where my mama used to hang quilts to dry, and the way this house remembers her. I reckon that's why I'm still here. Stubbornness, love, and a little bit of duty to keep the porch light burning for anyone who should come by. I don't know what it is that knocks. I've got a reasonable head on my shoulders that says it's a loose hinge, a branch in the wind, the house settling in the way old timber does. I've got a heart that remembers what my grandmother and my aunt told me about listening to the things the night brings. I've also got an instinct that if something's tapping on your window 3 times under a moon, it wants an answer. For now, I do what folks always tell you to do with the unexplainable. I watch, I bless the house, I keep my lamp on sometimes, and I plant new zinnias when spring calls. I answer the knocks in daylight with a polite, "Can I help you?" If it's the wind, I nod at it and move on. If it's someone needing help, I give them a quilt and a cup of coffee. If it's something else, something that knows the things of the dark, I listen and I keep my wits about me. Not all stories have an ending where the door opens and everything makes sense. Sometimes the best you can do is hold your place, keep the light on, and tell the tale so somebody else will listen if it ever comes to their window. Thanks for hearing me out. If anybody else calls in about the knocks, I want to hear those stories. Maybe together we can figure whether it's mischief, memory, or messengers. All right, that's enough rambling for one night. Good night, y'all, and mind your shutters.
Hey, I have a story that I've been thinking about recently, and it's been gnawing at me. I figured if I said it out loud somewhere, maybe I could finally make sense of it. It was during my junior year of college. I had this bad habit, waiting until the very last minute to write papers. One week in particular, I had a huge English literature essay due on the life of Victorian poets. Big deal. Worth a large chunk of the grade. Naturally, I ended up in the library that night, not just late, but after hours. The campus was quiet. Street lights on the paths flickered in the wind, the quad was empty, and the whole place felt like a ghost town. I walked into the library and got that chill you get when a building is completely empty. No voices, no footsteps, nothing but the echo of your own shoes on the tile. The library was old, Gothic almost, built in the 1920s. Stone walls, tall arched windows, and those towering wooden stacks that smelled like old books, dust, and polish. During the day, it was comforting. At night, it became different. The shadows stretched like dark fingers between the shelves. The air smelled faintly musty, and even the little hum of the fluorescent lights felt heavier somehow. I came in through the back entrance, carrying my backpack in one hand, coffee in the other. By the time I got settled on the third floor stacks, it was close to midnight. The world outside was quiet, but inside, the building seemed to be breathing in rhythm with me. I set my bag down, arranged my notes, and got to typing. And that's when I heard it. A whisper. Soft, almost inaudible, like someone muttering a sentence to themselves in another room. I froze. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. It's just your imagination, I told myself. I was tired. Hours of caffeine and cramming make your mind play tricks. But the whisper came again. And then, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Someone, or something, moving between the stacks, carefully, almost measured. I could feel the vibration of the floor beneath my feet, but I knew the library was empty. There were no janitors that late, no students sneaking around. I tried to convince myself it was echoing from somewhere else. You know how sound bounces in those old buildings. I even muttered under my breath, "Hello?" Nothing. Just a faint rustle as if the books themselves were shifting. And then I saw it. Well, almost. Out of the corner of my eye, a shadow moved between the stacks. Quick, fluid, but not quite human. Every instinct in me told me to look directly, but I didn't. I stayed hunched over the table, hoping if I didn't make eye contact, it would leave. But I felt it watching, following me, moving silently. I got up slowly, trying not to make a sound. Step by step, I moved toward the nearest stack, peeking around the end. Empty. Nothing. But a book had fallen to the floor, Wuthering Heights, face down. I didn't touch it. I just stared at it, pulse racing. I tried rational explanations. Maybe it was the draft from the old windows. Maybe it was the building settling. But something about the timing, the pattern, the presence, I couldn't shake it. I kept working, typing a few paragraphs, then glancing over my shoulder. Whispering again. Footsteps again. And then came the faint, metallic click of a ladder moving, though I knew none of them were in use. I swear, it was as if the stacks themselves were alive, moving around me, keeping watch. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. It's hard to say. Time warped in that space. Every so often, a book would tilt, a page would flicker open. The whispers grew more coherent. I couldn't understand the words at first, just sounds, murmurs, but gradually fragments began to emerge. Leave, don't. I felt a presence close, not threatening, not malicious. But there, behind me, just at the edge of perception. I turned slowly, and in the reflection of the dark windows along the far wall, I saw it. Pale, almost translucent, standing near the philosophy stacks. I couldn't make out features. Just there, watching. I bolted. Backpack in one hand, coffee spilled across my papers, and ran down the aisles toward the exit. The building seemed to stretch endlessly, shadows twisting, the whispering chasing me down each corridor. I reached the front doors, threw them open, and collapsed on the steps. Heart pounding, lungs burning, adrenaline sharp as a knife. Outside, the campus was still and empty, not a soul in sight. The next day, I told my friends vaguely. Old building quirks, I said. Just tired. But the memory wouldn't let me go. Every night after that, I'd replay it. The shadow, the whispers, the books moving on their own. I even tried going back once, during the day. Nothing moved. The building was just a library again. quiet, safe. But at night, it wasn't. I never went back after hours again. I finished my papers on time for the most part and moved on with my life. But sometimes when I'm up late or walking past old stone buildings in the city, I remember those faint whispers, soft footsteps, and I can't help but feel that library is still alive, waiting for someone to notice. I don't know if it was a ghost, a hallucination, or some strange combination of exhaustion and architecture, but I remember every detail. The whispering, the shadow, the way the books shifted as if the building itself were breathing. And I remember the feeling of being seen, but not threatened. Of being warned, maybe, to respect a space that had its own life.
Hey there. I hope this thing's recording. I ain't called in before, though I listen when I'm driving nights. Folks on your show, well, they talk in a way that sounds familiar. That's why I figured maybe I ought to leave this message just to get it off my chest. Anyway, here goes. Bear with me. I don't usually tell this tale to many people. I grew up near a wide river bend just outside town. One of those sleepy country places where the road dips down and the trees lean in like they're whispering across the water. Folks around here don't call it by the name on the map. They just say the river, same as they have for generations. The river ain't deep, except after storms, but it's quick underneath, like the water's running to catch up with something. My grandma used to say, that river remembers more than it forgives. I never quite knew what that meant, but older folks say the weirdest stuff so serious you don't dare laugh. She'd say it while she was shelling peas or snapping beans, like she wasn't even talking to me, more like speaking toward the river itself. Back then, I figured it was just superstition. You know how country grandparents are. Nature's alive to them in a way city folks can't wrap their heads around. Thing is, I grew up right next to it, so I learned the sounds it makes. Rivers got moods. In the summer, it hums low. In winter, you hear it clatter against the rocks. When a storm's coming, it talks like a man clearing his throat. Folks nearby know how to listen. We had to. Weather don't play fair out here. Rain comes in sideways, thunder rolls through like it got lost on the way to the mountains. Sometimes the storms hit the river valley first, and the old houses don't take kindly to surprises. All that's just background, though. Let me get to the night I wanted to tell you about. I'd just gotten off an extra shift, one of those long days where you feel your own heartbeat in your legs. Sun was long gone, and the sky had that damp, soft feeling it gets before dawn. I was driving the back road home, the one that hugs the river real close on the low stretch. People say it floods easy, and it does, but it's quicker than taking the highway, and at that hour I wasn't in the mood for lights and traffic. I had my window cracked because the truck don't cool like it used to, and the air smelled like mud and honeysuckle, heavy and sweet. The kind of smell that tells you rain's been somewhere nearby, even if you ain't seen it. So I'm driving slow, half tuning in to the night sounds, tree frogs, the hiss of the tires, that soft electric buzz from the dashboard, when this figure steps up out of the dark by the riverbank. Not fast, not sudden, just rises up where the brush breaks open. I darn near slammed the brakes through the floor. My headlights caught enough to see it was a woman. Tallish, shoulders narrow, clothes hanging on her like they'd been soaked through and dried wrong. She didn't wave me down, didn't move toward me. She just stepped close enough to the edge of the road that the light landed on her face. And I swear to you, she had this look like she'd been walking all night and wasn't sure she'd made it to the right place. Now, I'm not stupid. I've seen enough folks stranded or looking for help after breaking down. But this stretch of road's empty. No houses for a good walk, no stores, nothing but river and trees and that old gravel pull-off. I crack my window down a little more and call out, "Ma'am, you all right? You need help?" She just stared at me, not angry, not scared, just focused, like she was trying to place me. Then she raised her arm real slow and pointed at the river behind her. Not the road, not me. the river. Then she said, "Don't walk the bank after midnight." Voice was soft, not whispery, just quiet like she didn't want to wake someone up. Now look, this might sound strange, but people in my family have been saying stuff like that my whole life. Rules, warnings, old stories. Don't sweep after dark. Don't whistle near still water. Don't answer your name if you hear it carried on the wind. You grow up around enough of that, and you hear someone saying something weird in the middle of nowhere, your brain don't jump to crazy. It jumps to pay attention. I said, "All right, ma'am, I won't. But do you need a ride? You headed somewhere?" She didn't blink, didn't move. Just said, "The river, don't forget. You stay off the banks." Then she took one step backward toward the water, and in 1 second she was swallowed by the dark. Headlights didn't catch her. No splash, no rustling, like she stepped through a curtain. I sat there so long the engine started running hot. I ain't ashamed to say I locked my doors. Eventually I drove on, slow as a funeral procession, checking the mirrors every 2 seconds like she was going to show up behind me. But the rest of the road stayed empty, just the river humming, and the night sweating down on everything. When I got home, I tried to chalk it up to being tired. Maybe she'd been walking the road and ducked into the brush. Maybe she lived near the far end of the bend. Maybe she was confused or afraid. A real woman, a real situation. I wanted to believe that. But here's where things start feeling wrong. Next morning before work, I swung by the sheriff's office. Small place, maybe 10 chairs and a soda machine that eats quarters, to mention what I had seen. Not because I thought it was paranormal, just in case she needed help. Sheriff knows me. He asked what mile marker, what she looked like, what direction she'd come from. Then he gave me this kind of tired look, the kind older black men give when they're trying to decide whether you need the truth or the polite version. He said, "Son, you sure you didn't just see the fog rolling off the water? Happens this time of year." I told him no. She spoke to me. Twice. Then he got real quiet, picked up his coffee like he needed something to hold on to. Finally, he said, "I'll send a car out there. But folks play tricks on that stretch. Sound travels funny. Water reflects things wrong," which is country talk for. He knew something about that area I didn't, but didn't want me poking around. Later that week, right before midnight, I couldn't sleep. And I did the dumbest thing I could have done. I drove back down there. Not because I wanted to see her. Just I needed to check the land. Needed to see that it still looked like the world made sense. The river was high. Not flood high, just restless. Trees on the far bank looked like charcoal stencils. Moon hung low and red, one of those nights where everything feels heavier than it ought to. I parked near the pull-off, left the engine running. Didn't even open my door. And darned if I didn't hear it, the sound of someone walking along the river stones. Not fast, just a slow, steady crunch, 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 like bare feet pressing wet gravel. But I couldn't see a thing. Not with the headlights, not with the high beams. Sound came from everywhere and nowhere. Then, real soft like wind sliding between cattails, I heard a woman say, "Midnight ain't safe. Go home." I didn't argue. I put that truck in gear so fast, I nearly tore up the transmission. Been 3 or so months since then, and I still don't take the river road after dark. Don't care if it adds 20 minutes to my drive. Don't care if gas hits the roof. I stick to the lit highway, where the worst thing you see is a deer staring at you like you owe it money. I told my aunt. She's one of those church ladies who believes the Lord speaks through anything he wants. And she said something that didn't help me sleep. She said, "Sometimes the dead warn you 'cause the living won't." I asked her what that means, and she just shook her head and told me to stop asking questions I ain't ready for answers to. I'm trying to be rational. I really am. Could have been a real woman. Could have been echo off the water. Could have been me half asleep and spooked by shadows. Maybe even was the river itself. Either way, you don't forget a voice telling you not to walk the riverbank after midnight. Especially when it sounds like someone who knows you'll be tempted to try. Anyway, that was a lot longer than I meant for it to be. Sorry if I rambled. Just been needing to say it somewhere. Folks won't laugh me out the room. If anyone else calls your show talking about strange warnings or river hauntings, I'd like to hear it. Maybe I'm not the only one who heard her.
I hope you're still collecting stories. I'm not even sure this counts as a haunting. It might just be my head running wild, right? But I don't know how to make sense of it. So here goes. There's a park beside my flat. It's tiny, nothing special, just a patch of grass, 2 swings, a slide that looks like it's been kicked one too many times, and a bench that's forever damp, even on dry days. It's the kind of place mothers bring toddlers to burn off energy, then curse themselves for forgetting wipes. Anyway, I walk past it every morning on the way to the bus stop, and that's when I first noticed the swing. One morning, early January, cold enough that the frost was still clinging to the railings, I saw one swing moving, real slow, like someone was giving it a lazy push. It wasn't windy that day. The trees were still as statues, there wasn't so much as a rustle, and the other swing, right beside it, hung dead still. I just shrugged, figured maybe a dog bumped it or a kid left a moment ago. Nothing to it, but I kept seeing it, every day. Rain, no rain, dawn, midday, evening when I'd come home late. One swing, always moving, never fast, never wild, always as if it was being pushed gently, like whoever was on it didn't want to draw attention. And the sound, it's subtle, you wouldn't notice unless you listened for it. The hinge makes this slow, uneven creak, not loud enough to sound spooky, just tired, like an old voice humming, like a lullaby someone forgot. At first I told myself there has to be a logical reason. Maybe the chains are lighter or the seats at a slightly different angle. Maybe the position of the trees creates just enough airflow. I even tried pushing both swings one morning, making sure they started at the same time. The one that usually moves? It slowed down so gently like it hated to stop, while the other jerked and clattered like it wanted nothing to do with the motion. I laughed about it to myself, actually, thought, grand, I found the most haunted swing around. But things got stranger. About 2 weeks ago I had a late shift at work. I didn't get home until nearly midnight. The park was empty, streetlights flickering that yellowish glow that makes everything look a bit sick. I checked the swings without even meaning to. Habit, I guess. And there it was, moving, slow as ever. Only this time someone was sitting on the bench. A woman. Dark coat, hair down to her shoulders. She was looking straight at the swing, like I do, like she'd been watching it for a long time, just watching it sway. I didn't want to stare, didn't want to be that weirdo gawking at someone in the middle of the night, so I walked faster, trying not to overthink it. Maybe she was just waiting for someone, or clearing her head. People do odd things at odd hours. Still, I checked behind me. You know when curiosity wins out, even if you regret it? I looked back. She was still staring at the swing, not moving, not looking at me, just transfixed. I kept thinking about her that night, not because I thought she was dangerous, just because I couldn't explain it. Who sits in front of a moving swing at nearly midnight, in the cold, not scrolling on her phone, not talking to anyone, just watching the empty swing? I forced myself the next morning to walk through the park, even though I felt stupid about being nervous. And the bench? It was damp from dew, except for one spot, like someone had been sitting there long enough to keep it dry. You're probably thinking what I thought. I imagined the whole thing. My brain filled in details. It was dark. Maybe shadows tricked me. But last night, I heard it. From my window. The park's not far, and I sleep with the window cracked for air. Around 1 a.m, I woke up to the softest creak, just faint, like someone was rocking in a chair far away. I pulled back the curtain. I swear to you, the swing was moving harder than I'd ever seen it. Not wild, but deliberate, like someone was really pushing. And the bench, there was someone on it again. I couldn't see clearly from my window, just the shape of a person, Same posture, same stillness. Watching. I shut the curtains, sat in bed with my heart going mad in my chest. I told myself to get up, turn on the light, distract myself, but I couldn't move. I just listened until I finally fell asleep again. And today, morning, I walked past the swing on my way to work. It was still as it's ever been, like nothing happened. Except the grass under it. It looked pressed down, like small feet had scuffed the ground back and forth, little arcs, like someone had been pumping their legs. Maybe it's just kids. Maybe someone's coming out after dark. Maybe the woman is a mum grieving something. Maybe that swing is her way of, I don't know, remembering. Or maybe the swing isn't the thing that's haunted. Maybe it's a place someone refuses to leave. I don't know why I'm telling you this, except every day I walk past that swing, and every time I see it move just a little, something in my chest goes cold. Not frightened exactly, more like whatever's there is patient, and I'm starting to feel like it knows I'm watching too. Anyway, that's it. Thanks for listening. If you have any idea what to make of it, let me know. I'll keep you posted if anything changes. Goodbye, and good night, I suppose.
Hi. I used to dig for opal. Not the pretty postcards in a shop kind of story, proper opal fields out in the middle of nowhere, where the sky's so wide you can see your future coming and the nights are cold enough to make your bones creak. I was there when I was young and stupid, and I stayed long enough for the dirt to get under my fingernails and into the lines of my palms. Lots of fellas leave their teeth behind in those holes, one way or another. Me, I kept my teeth, kept my hands mostly, too. Just learned to listen. People outside think opal mining is a bit romantic. Head out, find a seam, make your fortune. It's not. It's swinging picks, it's cramped spaces, it's hours and hours with a headlamp on, scraping at the rock until the ache in your forearms is loud as a clock. It's sitting on the mullock heap after 12 hours of dust and sun, a tin mug of something foul in your hand, and watching the horizon feel like an old man's back. Most nights, you talk, you play cards, you tell stories so the dark doesn't swallow you whole. But when the shaft goes quiet, when even the machines are cooling and the generator is dropped to a whisper, you realize how loud the earth can be on its own. There's a rule down there: never dig farther than you can see the light from the surface. Half the old-timers will tell you it's a superstition, the other half will look at you like you've been born yesterday and tell you a story about a mate who didn't listen. We left the stories out in the open where the kids could hear them and think twice. The ground remembers, the miners would say, not as a metaphor. It keeps receipts. This one night sticks with me more than the others. Took me years to put it into words that don't knot my throat. We were working out of an old place, a narrow tunnel, maybe just wide enough for one of those little battery locos and a bloke to pass. The host rock there was a pale, sugary stuff, full of seams, but not an easy lot. We'd been down a week, rotating, and I'd been on the night crew. Nights are quieter. The surface world goes away, and your watch is the drip from the roof and the hum of the pumps. Me and a coworker were swinging picks and trying to keep a seam open where the beam wanted to close. He was the sort of bloke who laughed at the dark until it started laughing back. I liked that about him. Trouble is, you end up remembering who laughed louder. About 3 in the morning, the siren on the surface, the slow, half-hearted thing they used to change shifts, coughed and went off somewhere beyond the fan. That was normal. What wasn't normal was the sound I heard after. At first I thought it was a rock fall, but it wasn't the sharp crack of a collapse. It was softer, like gravel being dragged, a slow, steady crunch from deeper in the drive, coming the other way down the tunnel. Nothing else made a sound for a long moment. Even the pump seemed to be holding its breath. He put his pick down and cupped his hands around his lamp. "You hear that?" he said, quiet, like the word might scare it off. Sound came again, slow steps, deliberate, not the clumsy tumble of an animal. It had rhythm. It had time. It was walking like a man, walking a path he's known his whole life. I told myself it was the loco. We kept a loco in a siding for emergencies. Maybe someone had fired it up. Thought as much until the steps stopped right at the edge of the light I'd got from my own headlamp. Not close, not in my face, but just beyond the cone, where the shadows gather and make their own weather. It stopped. There was a long minute of nothing but the drip and the dust fall. Then it moved again, crunching, and retreated, the way someone might back away from a fire after realizing they're seen. My buddy said, "Who's there?" like a dare, like he expected a mate to jump out and shout a joke. No answer. The steps continued away, down deeper than the drive had been bored, toward the old workings, those labyrinths left when men had thought they knew the ground's temper and were proven wrong. We'd been warned to stay clear of those. Old pipes and timbers, bone-deep cuts in the earth where other people had pushed too far. I climbed up to the wagon and took my lamp off the bracket, more to have something to do than because I was thinking straight. My hands were steady enough, but my stomach had dropped like I'd missed the last rung of a ladder. If a bloke had been walking out there, another crew, a blind tramper, we'd have heard voices. We'd have heard the clink of a pick, the scuff of boots. But it was only those slow footfalls. After a while, when the steps had gone on for long enough to become a pattern I could map out on the roof, a smell reached us. Like old rain in a dry season, metallic, almost sweet, the smell of the ground when something changes. I don't know how to explain that smell except to say it's the kind you notice when your hands are full of something you ought not to be holding. We moved to the tunnel wall, and he laid his palm on the rock. "She's been open," he said. "Down there. Long time." We left it to the supervisors, the ones that had sat in the break room more nights than they cared to admit, and told them what we'd heard. They frowned and made notes in their logbooks while I watched their pens scratch like small creatures. You get 3 types of reactions in those rooms: the laughs, the shrugs, and the quiet-eyed nods that mean somebody knows too well. The foreman, an old prick, he folded his arms and said nothing, which is usually the worst sign. We checked the cams later. There were cameras bolted in at certain junctions for safety. Miners are terrible at hiding. The footage showed nothing but darkness and the weak dust-grey glare of my headlamp. At one junction, the camera flickered like it always did when the batteries were running low, and for a handful of frames you could see a figure in the black, pale, maybe, where a shirt should be, but the image was corrupted before you could be sure. Corrupted images do strange things to a man. You either look away or you stop sleeping. Old miners, particularly the ones who've lost mates down there, have a way of telling you the world is not all you can stomach without telling you why. The earth takes its own, they'd say, nursing a cup that has seen better boiling water. She keeps tally. Some would explain in a half-mad way about gases, micro-tremors, the land contracting when it's bored out. There's truth in that. Those reasons are the sort that save men from superstition and keep them alive. But the other side, the whisper that the ground keeps what you dig out, that one lives in the corners of the break room where men don't talk about their children. People go missing in mining towns in 100 mundane ways. Drunk driving, falls from an old stack, a wrong turn in a high wind and you're a body at the bottom of a culvert. But the stories we tell of the earth keeping someone are different. They're about the place itself swallowing a man with such deliberation that his absence becomes an echo. You hear it in the way the ladder squeals when someone climbs, in the way an old lamp will die in your hands just after whispering a name. There was a kid, Once, all teeth and a foreman's job promise. He went down to survey a pick in some old lead. We sent a crew to fetch him. They found his torch and his boot prints, all going away, deeper into a blind drive. No body, no sign he'd crawled out. All those prints ended at a patch of ground that had no weight left in it, as if the soil had taken him into itself. They tell that story in the pub at closing time. They tell it with a kind of hollow laugh, the sort that keeps you drinking. The steps we heard that night kept walking and walking in my head for months after. You try to draw lines back to something sensible, a trapped fox, a bloke from a rival clan having a laugh, but the pattern makes your logic fray. Slow, steady, away and toward old places like it was checking doors. Sometimes the ground wants a tally paid before it'll speak again. After that night I took to carrying 2 lamps, always, even when I was done for the shift. That coworker left a year later, married some girl in a town up north. He told me he never wanted to hear a rock fall again with his back to it. I laughed then, because that's what we do. Men laugh at the thing that could make them weep. But sometimes, in the dark when the world is only the cone of your lamp and the crush of your own breath, the laugh dies early. These days I work the surface. Different kind of dirt. I run a jackhammer, or I drive a water truck to wash off the wheel arches so the inspectors don't have heart attacks. I tell this story in a pub where the beer is flat and the chairs wear grooves from elbows. People smile, nod, and tell me of their own shadows. The world's full of noises that want you to notice, and we're greedy enough to listen. Do I believe the earth keeps those who dig too deep? I don't know if belief is the word. I know what I've heard. I felt the hairs on my arms stand like thorns in the dark. I know the smell that came up after the steps passed by. I know the way a book of matches I'd kept in my pocket went damp on the same night. Facts? Maybe not. But facts are thin things, and a man burns up quick on them down below. If you ask me for an explanation that'll sit easy, well, there's likely a dozen technical reasons. Ground movement, settling seams, gas pockets causing a small collapse that sound like footsteps, the way sound bends in a labyrinth of tunnels. They're things that explain the outside world to engineers and keep insurance companies from fainting. But there's a different explanation men pass on when the lamps are dim and the men are honest. The land has memory. It keeps a tally. It lets you hear the people you left behind, so you might put down your pick and go home before you add your own name to the ledger. So I listen, now, not with ears only, but with the weight that comes from having been there. If you're down a shaft and you hear steps that your watch can't account for, don't be a hero. Don't follow. Some footsteps are the mind checking on its own accounts. And if a place decides to keep what you dig from it, it'll do so without malice, just a slow, inexorable rhythm of something older than your reasons. That's my tale. Not a ghost story for the sake of a shiver, just a memory that won't be quiet. Sometimes telling it is the same as setting a lamp beside the road, a warning and a light. If you ever hear crunching down your own drive in the small hours, slow and measured, remember what the old men say, the earth keeps receipts. Better to be alive and owing than polite and missing.
That's it for this episode of Phantom Phone Line. This episode is part of Season 0, featuring crafted tales inspired by folklore, urban legends, classic ghost stories, and the paranormal. If you enjoyed tonight's tales, don't forget to subscribe to Phantom Phone Line, and be sure to share this with a friend who loves the unusual and unexplained. If you want to catch up on previous episodes, check our website at www.phantomphoneline.com for links and more information. We've reached the end of the line for now, but remember to stay tuned and keep listening for the next one, here on Phantom Phone Line. Any views and opinions expressed are those of the individuals involved and do not necessarily reflect those of the show's producers, affiliates, or sponsors. This content is intended for entertainmental purposes only and is not a substitute for professional advice or services of any kind. Viewers and listeners should exercise caution, seek professional advice if needed, and are encouraged to draw their own conclusions. Viewer and listener discretion is advised. Some content may be disturbing, sensitive, or triggering to certain audiences. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations is purely coincidental. Some parts of this content may feature elements that were created, altered, enhanced, or modified using digital production tools, techniques, or other advanced production methods, including synthetic or automated processes. All content is the property of Phantom Phone Line and may not be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form without prior written consent.